All right, here are 28 lighting tips in 7-ish minutes. I'm going to go through some basic tips, shooting outside, different kinds of lights you can invest in, positioning your lights, and some camera settings like white balance, ISO, and aperture to make sure you look good in any lighting. You can also use the chapters below to jump to a specific section. All right, basic tips. Number 1, we want to see your face. The whole purpose of lighting, especially if you're doing talking head videos like tutorials or video podcasts, is we want to see the person's face or your face. We want to eliminate as many harsh shadows and hard lines as possible. And this is whether you're doing short form or long form content. So when you think about lighting, think about how are you going to light your subject or your face. Number 2, avoid the raccoon eyes. Depending on your lighting, maybe you have a top-down ceiling fan light or you're just not positioning them properly. You want to avoid those dark shadows under the eyes. It kind of looks like a raccoon. And you also want to avoid that up lighting because that's kind of like scary movie-like. So avoid the shadows either going downwards or upwards, which comes from your lights being too far up and pointed down, or the lights are too far down and pointed up. We'll talk more about lighting positioning in a second. But number 3, most rooms you're going to have ceiling fan lights, and honestly, those are going to be the most unbecoming lights possible. So if at all possible, turn off your ceiling fan lights and try to use other lights that you're investing in, or even using a window, which we'll talk about in a second too. Number 4, when you're lighting a subject or yourself, think about dimming your background. This way you are more in focus. Now you can have accent lights and colors like I have here in the studio, but when it comes to the main focus, you want to make sure your background is dimmed and your subject is the one that's well lit. And speaking of background, number 5, use your background either with accent lighting or colors. This could be practical lights that you put on shelves, or you can use color like I do. This way you get multiple looks with the same set. Look, it's going to turn purple in a second, right? Or maybe I'm feeling orange one day, can do orange too, maybe teal. And all of these are smart lights. This way I can change the colors with just a click of a button, and I can have multiple looks right here in the same studio. Let's go back to blue. All right, tip section number 2, let's talk about the kinds of lights you can use. Now, what you see a lot of on social media are ring lights. These tend to be the most inexpensive. You can get them for like 15 or 20 bucks. But honestly, I would not recommend these kinds of lights. Often they're pretty harsh. They don't provide a good diffusing or soft light across the face. And you know that look when you see it, especially like on Instagram Reels and TikTok. If you have one, maybe just throw a sheet or something over it to make it softer and diffuse the light a little more. And what I mean by diffuse is actually spread it out so it's less of a harsh circle. Number 2, the next step up is a small LED like this one. I've talked about the SmallRig Light a lot. It actually works really well. It has a built-in diffuser, which is like this white silicone around it. You can change the intensity and color temperature. We're going to talk about temperature in a second. And honestly, you can get a great look out of these little lights. Plus, they're often rechargeable, so you can recharge this via USB-C, and it will last for hours on a single charge. Number 3, if you want to upgrade to something that will stay on your desk, I would recommend these slightly larger LED panels. These are the Elgato key lights. I actually use a smaller version of this for my fill and hair light, and they're not going to be super expensive. You can get these for about $140, $150, and it has kind of a built-in diffuser, which will help give you that soft light, less harsh lines and shadows. Number 4, when it comes to lighting, if you want to upgrade to really pro lights, you can get something like this Amaran 200X. This is actually the light that I use here in my studio, accompanied with a light dome. And a light dome is just something you attach to the light, again, to diffuse it and make it softer. You can see it here in my studio, and it's literally the light you see in every video. Nice soft light, no shadows, and it's not super expensive. It is $350, but this light will last you for years and years. Now, in addition to the actual light, you should think about diffusers, which is like a soft box that will soften the light or diffuse it. You can also get separate diffusers or shades that you put on stands, but that's really more in a professional shooting environment. Now, number 6, I also use a grid on my light, and a grid is like that checkered type thing you might see on some of the soft boxes. Honestly, I didn't know what it was used for at first, but what it does is actually help direct the light more to the subject and less on the background. So it actually helped dim my background so my colored lighting in the back actually has more of an effect. So try out the grid if you're using one of these soft boxes. And number 7, the last kind of light would be RGB or colored lighting. We talked about that in the background, but as you can see, these are all RGBs. That's how I changed the color to purple and teal. I have LEDs all over the studio and actually do an in-depth video kind of behind the scenes going through all the gear that I have in this room. So I'll link that video above and down in the description. All right, category number 3 is light positioning. Once you've invested in some lights, maybe you have an LED panel or even a big light, where are you going to put it? Number 1, when you think about your key light, which is the main light that's going to be lighting your face, try to put it at a 45-degree angle above. That angle is also going to help reduce the reflections in your glasses, which is why you don't see lights in my glasses right now. But it's also a more natural look than having that light at eye level directly in front of you. Raise it above a little bit, 45-degree angle ideally. Number 2, avoid that below eye level positioning of lights because that low lighting is going to give you the spooky look. Number 3, shadows are not necessarily bad. You might be trying to create a dramatic look, maybe something more cinematic. And so you can do something like I turned off my fill light right here, and now you see there's more shadows on this side of my face, but you might want that look. Maybe you're going to shine some colored lighting on there, or that's just the look you prefer. That's okay too. But if you want to remove the shadows on that side of the face, that's what a fill light is for. It's opposite my key light and just helps the lighting on my face be a little more even. It's typically dimmer than what you keep your key light at, so it's okay to have a little different brightness on one side of the face than the other. That actually adds contour to a face and could be pleasing to see. So that was actually tip number 4 in this section, is using that second light as a fill light to balance out the face. But our 5th tip for lighting is that 3-point lighting. I've talked about it before, but if you have a third light, a hair light is ideal. The hair light is going to go behind you, ideally higher than the subject pointed down at their head. And sometimes it's hard to see the difference. It's subtle, but I'm going to turn it off for a second. That's without the hair light, and you'll see it just kind of makes me look a little flatter. The head and shoulders are less separated from the background, but if I turn it on, you'll see it just adds a little more dimension to the shot. So if you have a third light, hair light behind you and above is ideal. All right, category number 4, let's talk about natural lighting. Maybe you want to film outside or you don't have any lights or budget to get some. Well, you can use the natural lighting coming in from your window. Now, number 1, if you want just a really cinematic look, maybe you're shooting some B-roll, golden hour is always a fun time to shoot. It's typically right after the sun rises or right before it sets. Lighting is usually even, not very harsh, and you get that nice golden tones from your shots. But number 2, if you're going to film outside, believe it or not, cloudy is actually better. If you have an overcast sky, that means that the sun is kind of shrouded and there's not going to be those harsh rays or changes between clouds passing over the sun. A cloudy, overcast day is actually going to get you great even lighting if you're filming outside. Now, number 3, if you're going to be inside and trying to use natural lighting, a window can be your friend or your enemy. Remember, you don't want to put a window behind you. That's going to create a silhouetted look. Not great. You want to be facing a window. That'll provide decent lighting. It might be a little harsh, so you could throw a sheet over the window, maybe multiple sheets, and those sheets will act as a diffuser like we talked about before to make the lighting less harsh. Number 5, if you're going to film outside or by a window, remember the sun moves throughout the day. So if you're going to be doing a 2 to 3 hour recording, however the sun and light looks like through a window right now, it's going to be different in 3 hours. So keep that in mind, maybe do some tests, see what it looks like coming through the window at 2 p.m. and then again at 4 p.m. or earlier in the day, and plan accordingly. This way it doesn't take you by surprise. And number 6, when it comes to natural lighting, if you're going to be outside and you're using a camera like a mirrorless or DSLR, you might want to use an ND filter. An ND filter will actually go on the lens of your camera and dim the shot or reduce the light coming in, which means you can turn down your aperture number, which also means to open it up and let more light in, which will give you that nice blurred background effect. If you try to do that without an ND filter, things will get blown out and too bright. So if you're going to be shooting outside with a mirrorless or DSLR camera, check out an ND filter. I'll put links to one down in the video description. All right, final category, number 5, your camera settings and the lights you use have a huge part to play in the quality of your video. So number 1, what is color temperature? This is also related to white balance on your camera. White balance is usually the color temperature adjusting to the lights in your room. Color temperature can vary. If it's too cool, things are going to look very blue. If it's too warm, it's going to look orangey and gross. So you want to make sure that your camera settings and the color temperature of your light match. Now, if you're trying to color grade footage or you're doing a cinematic look, that might be something you're adjusting in the editor. But when you're filming, especially talking head videos like this or a video podcast, tip number 2 is match the color temperature on your camera to the color temperature of your lights. So here in my studio, all of my lights are set to 4400K, that's the color temperature, and my camera is also set in the white balance settings to 4400K. This way everything matches and it will be the most natural look, and you can always tell by looking at skin tones whether or not those look natural or a little too orange or blue. Number 3, another important setting on your camera is ISO. The ISO rating is light sensitivity, so if you're in a dim environment, you're going to have to turn up the ISO. But higher ISO numbers also means more noise or grain. So you want to balance it with enough light in your filming environment so you can leave your ISO at a lower number that can be all the way down at 100 or your mirrorless camera or DSLR might have a native ISO around 800, you can run that too. But you don't want to get over 1,000 or multiple thousand ISO. That's why when you shoot at night with a mirrorless or DSLR camera and you turn that ISO all the way up, it gets real grainy. Number 4, another setting on your camera is aperture. This is the f-stop. A lot of times when you buy lenses or look at lenses, you'll see the letter F and then a number afterwards. The lower that number is, the more open the aperture is for your lens. And the aperture is the hole that lets light in through the lens to hit your camera sensor. The lower the number, or the more open it is, the blurrier your background will be. I'm running it around an f1.4 right now, and that's why this background is blurred. This is actually not a very large room, so I have to have that aperture way down in order to blur this background. Now, depending on how far your subject is from the background, you could probably run it in an f2 point something or 3 point something, and you'll see to get lenses with those lower f-stop numbers, you will have to invest in more expensive lenses. Usually the kit lenses, the ones that come with a camera, are around f3.5 or higher. Again, aperture is going to be to taste, but if you want that blurred background from your subject, the lower the f-stop number is, usually the better. But just keep in mind, to get a blurrier background, try to lower that f-stop number if possible. Also, if you want to be technical about it, the blurred background is called bokeh. And that was 28 tips across multiple categories, and I'm not even sure how many minutes. It was probably more than 7. But if you have any questions about lighting, leave comments below this video. I'd love to help you there. Don't forget to subscribe to the Riverside channel and hit that like button before you go. And if you want that behind the scenes tour of my studio right here, which is actually a very small room, but I film all the YouTube videos here, then check out this video right up here. And if you want to learn about Riverside and all the amazing editing capabilities, so your talking head videos, podcasts, interviews, all can look great in high quality, check out this video right up here. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you next time.